What's up everyone, it's Endymion. In this video, I want to speak about the controversy surrounding the release of the new survival horror game, The Callisto Protocol, as well as how sites like Metacritic have such a powerful pull on the purchasing influences of the consumer, and how this site, as well as review scores in general, may not be exactly what they seem to be. As always, subscribe if you enjoy, share if you'd like, and turn on notifications for future content. Now, let's begin. So the Callisto Protocol has finally released and has become the newest sacrifice in the holy law of a single metric deciding whether people buy or wait for a sale. As soon as I saw that Callisto had review scores all over the place, I knew I was in for a good time. I've been playing Callisto myself since release on the PS5, and I gotta say, when I see reviews like GameSpot's with a 5 out of 10, I have to wonder if we're playing the same game. So far, Callisto feels like a true survival horror game, which makes sense since Glenn Schofield, the creator of Dead Space, directed this as well. Graphically, the game is incredible, with insane attentions to detail and claustrophobic areas crawling with mutated inmates looking to make macaroni with your insides. What I'm really enjoying, however, is how combat feels and evolves as you play. When you start out, you only have your crowbar, which helps differ Callisto from Dead Space with you being able to bob and weave around enemy attacks like you're Muhammad Ali. It feels fresh and makes every encounter feel like you're fighting for your life, which makes sense since this is survival horror after all. But as you play and gain firearms, the game starts to show its roots with Dead Space. I also enjoy that there's no stupid upgrade material BS here. It just takes cash to 3D print yourself some new weapons, and each upgrade for weapons like the pistol or shotgun feels substantial. And the feedback from killing stuff is really grounded and it feels great. Best of all is the gauntlet you can use, which gives you Jedi Force powers and allows you to grip enemies and toss them into meat grinders to make lasagna with. Obviously, I don't have everything unlocked yet, but for what I've used so far, I'm having a really good time with Callisto. My biggest complaint early on is there's simply not enough inventory space to collect everything. But this makes sense, since the devs clearly wanted you to leave stuff behind and decide for yourself whether something is worth keeping or not. By the way, pro tip here, just sell anything you have in abundance for cash for upgrades, trust me. However, once you gain the environmental suit on the cover of the game, your inventory increases and my previous problem is gone, so that's good. Also, there's a few too many vents, but this is because it's on last gen 2 and it's used to mask loading screens. But yeah, Callisto is a good time so far. And if I had listened to the myriad of reviews from game journalists, I would be told to skip this game because they don't deem it worthy apparently. Which brings me to my issue with game journalism and the overall structure of reviews, especially these days. When Callisto's reviews came out, one of my best friends texted me saying he was unsure about buying the game now due to its score on Metacritic. Mind you, my buddy loves survival horror games, and I told him that if you love Resident Evil and Dead Space, you'll enjoy Callisto. But the Metacritic score had spoken and his wallet stayed sealed, and as I read online on places like Twitter, this weird joint agreement of a single metric on a website deciding whether millions of buyers pay full price or not was insane to me. By the way, Callisto has a 76 on PS5 and an 80 on PC. I really don't get how this is a low score, and it caused me to look up other games I've loved in the past and realize that these Metacritic scores didn't translate for me. One of my favorite games and franchises is Darksiders. The original and its sequel, for example, have an 83 on Metacritic, which for some is still too low for full price, which is ridiculous. Other games I have loved have lower scores, like Jedi Fallen Order with a 79, yet I would consider that to be one of the best games of 2019. Dying Light's even lower, but I had a blast with that game at release and loved every minute of it. Then there's the bizarrely lower score of Days Gone with 71, and I just can't agree with it. Days Gone was dope as hell. It also stars Sam Witwer, who by the way is in Callisto too. But while Days Gone's lower score for a first-party PlayStation title didn't affect its sales, the IP would actually go on to sell close to 10 million. But even though the game was a financial success for Sony, a sequel was rejected because of that single number on Metacritic. It was orange instead of green, so now that means we can't have a Days Gone 2, which sucks, especially if you've seen that game's twist ending. Jeff Ross, who worked on Days Gone and left the studio, eventually even said, and I quote, "At the time I left Sony, Days Gone had been out for a year and a half and sold over 8 million copies. It's since gone on to sell more and then 1 million plus on Steam. Local studio management always made us feel like it was a big disappointment." End quote. This single metric would go on to define many franchises and whether they live on or die immediately. One of the most insane stories of Metacritic is with the developer of Fallout New Vegas, Obsidian Entertainment. Chris Avallone, one of the main devs on that game, said that when he worked at Obsidian, they were in a contract where if New Vegas hit an 85 on Metacritic, the publisher would dish out royalties and bonuses to the developers in return for hitting that score. And guess where they landed? 84. They missed the mark by a single point. But it didn't matter to the publisher. Metacritic said 84, not 85, so the hundreds of devs who poured their souls into New Vegas and sacrificed their personal lives in the hopes of those royalties helping their families were sadly screwed over. Imagine putting your all into a game and crunching constantly just so you could get that royalty check so you could help your kids. But some yuppie game journalist typed 84 instead of 85. I would want to burn the whole company to the ground if that happened. So now I want to talk about how these reviewers are sometimes not who they seem to be. So let's talk about IGN. One of the biggest gaming websites, and frankly, a site I've fallen out of love with for a long time. Back in the day, there used to be a reviewer there who worked on the Nintendo side of things named Audrey Drake. She did many reviews for Nintendo games and always gave them insanely inflated scores. She even gave Pokemon Black and White 2 a 9.6 out of 10, which was ludicrously high for a game that felt more like an expansion than a true sequel. She also gave Animal Crossing New Leaf a 9.6 out of 10, and she also reviewed Fire Emblem Awakening and gave it, you guessed it, a 9.6 out of 10. As you can see, Audrey Drake clearly loves Nintendo first-party games, and her high review scores definitely persuaded many potential buyers to go and pick up these games because of her glowing reviews at IGN. What's more interesting is that Audrey would eventually leave IGN for a new job. And guess where that was? Yup, Nintendo. In retrospect, looking at her reviews would make one raise an eyebrow. How could you believe or listen to anything she said when she ended up working for the same company she was tasked with reviewing? You could even say she was doing this to impress Nintendo so she could land a job. And I wouldn't be surprised if these reviews were brought up in her interview for Nintendo, which no doubt helped her land the job too. But that wouldn't be the last time IGN had this happen either. God of War 2018 was given a 10 out of 10 at IGN and was reviewed by Jonathan Dornbush. And Johnny Boy would go on to score other PlayStation titles like Marvel Spider-Man Remastered, Ratchet & Clank, and Roller Dome, which he gave all 9s to. I guess you could say this guy really likes PlayStation-made games, right? Well, it gets even weirder. See, Jonathan would also end up reviewing The Last of Us Part 2, which he would give that game a 10 out of 10, and like his other reviews, it was another PlayStation first-party title. All of these reviews by Jonathan Dornbush have likely influenced consumers in buying these products. They see the big shiny 10 or 9 and immediately open their wallets because the gaming journalists have deemed it worthy of purchase. However, after his time reviewing and giving glowing scores to PlayStation games, he would eventually join Naughty Dog, the developer of The Last of Us and a PlayStation first-party studio, with a tweet on September 20th, 2022 saying, and I quote, "First day on the new job, and I'm absolutely thrilled to announce I've joined the Naughty Dog team as editorial content manager. This studio has meant so much to me my entire life. I couldn't be happier to join such a talented team." So just like Audrey Drake and her inflated scores for Nintendo landing her a job there, Jonathan Dornbush did the exact same thing. He gave every PlayStation first-party game a glowing review and ends up joining the very same studio 2 years later. So how can anyone take any of his reviews seriously at IGN? I mean, likely now that he's gone and the money spent by consumers who trusted IGN was spent, it was overall a win-win situation for both IGN and PlayStation. The review site got their ads paid, Sony got their money, and Johnny Boy landed a job at the same developer he gave a 10 out of 10 to. And I'm sure his glowing reviews for PlayStation didn't affect his chances of gaining the job. Of course not. That would be crazy. This incestuous relationship between gaming publications and the companies feeding them new games has made me extremely skeptical of all of them. I haven't listened to or taken a review from IGN as serious for years, because how can I when it has clear examples of biased scores? But then you have the other side of the spectrum with GameSpot and a game reviewer who worked there for a time named Jeff Gertzman. Quite a while back, Jeff Gertzman was tasked with reviewing the newest Kane and Lynch game, which he ended up giving a 6 out of 10 to because he thought it wasn't that great of a game. See, the problem was, however, that while Jeff was being honest and thought the game was average at best, GameSpot was also being paid handsomely by Kane and Lynch's publisher Eidos to run ads on the website. And when Eidos saw that the game they were paying GameSpot to promote was being given an average score, Eidos got really angry. So mad, in fact, that they threatened to break the agreement and pull all their ads from GameSpot because of Jeff's honest review. This entire situation was stupid to begin with. It wasn't Jeff's fault that Kane and Lynch was a bad game. It was the publisher and the people who made it. So what did GameSpot do, you may ask? Did they stick to their integrity and protect their own, or bend the knee to the company paying their bills at the time? Well, Jeff Gertzman would end up being fired from GameSpot for his review and was forced out by the management at the time. Thankfully, the people who fired Jeff no longer work at GameSpot, and Jeff would go on to other sites like Giant Bomb and beyond. But even so, the integrity of GameSpot as a review site, for me anyway, was forever ruined. I can't believe or trust anything they ever say about really any games anymore. So when I saw the 5 out of 10 for Callisto, I just laughed. I don't trust GameSpot in the same way that I don't trust IGN either when it comes to their reviews for anything Nintendo or PlayStation. Finally, I want to speak about an ex-IGN employee named Alana Pierce who spoke out about game reviews and how they're weighed against other websites. According to IBTTimes.com, Alana said, and I quote, "I'm not trying to reinforce things that aren't true because frankly, it would benefit me way more if I lied," she said. Comment sections, people are always talking about them. They're getting shares. The more audiences put weight on scores, the more it reinforces to these websites that they need to have scores because their audiences clearly really care about them and they get traffic from them, she said. Pierce went further on to talk about weighted scores as a thing that people also don't know. Metacritic doesn't actually accurately just aggregate scores. After reading some negative reviews about The Last of Us Part 2 that are unscored, she explained what Metacritic does. What Metacritic will often do is try to score the unscored reviews itself. They will kind of guess, and then add a score, and maybe they'll do that eventually for these ones that are currently unscored. But they do that. They also weigh different outlets' review scores differently, specifically pointing out IGN, The Guardian, and Game Informer because they are considered reputable outlets. They get a higher weight than other websites that Metacritic might not be familiar with. You put way too much stock into Metacritic is basically my point. It is also a very subjective outlet in a lot of ways, Pierce warned. End quote. Alana Pierce puts it nicely there that you can't really trust Metacritic because it can be so easily manipulated. Honestly, this entire relationship between developers, reviewers, and the industry as a whole has made me a very cynical man over the years, in case you haven't noticed. I rarely trust anything any of these websites post, which probably has you questioning, well, if you can't trust IGN or GameSpot, two of the arguably biggest video game websites on the planet, Who can you trust? Well, thanks to places like YouTube, you have a lot of options for reviews now. I would say, in my opinion, the most unbiased game review channel would be ACG on YouTube. If you haven't checked out his stuff, I highly recommend it. ACG is great because he doesn't sugarcoat anything, he just tells you how it is. He's kind of like Jeff Gertzman, except GameSpot can't fire ACG if he thinks a game sucks, thankfully. And unlike most of these reviewers who get free codes, the factor of money is usually never a problem because these reviewers obviously didn't pay for the game. ACG, for example, buys every game he reviews, regardless if he was given a copy, so he shows integrity because of that, and I applaud him. Of course, there's other great reviewers on YouTube like Super Bunny Hop, Mr. Matty Plays, or Luke Stevens. But really, if I were you, I wouldn't trust any gaming website when it comes to reviews these days. Many of them are in bed with the very publishers and developers that they do reviews for. And it's why I have little to no faith in award shows either, like the Game Awards or things like the Oscars or Emmys. Because a lot of these showcases are paid for by the same companies who have games or movies in the running for awards. And you'd have to be stupid to not believe that this exchange of money has no influence on which games get which award. Because if a game gets Game of the Year, Best RPG, or whatever, that isn't just an award that devs get to put in their trophy case. It becomes a legitimate marketing angle that companies can use when they sell their games, with many games having Game of the Year plastered in big font on their covers so consumers can blindly buy things and be influenced by the marketing. I mean, if a game says Game of the Year on it, surely it has to be good, right? What's hilarious is you have games that weren't even nominated for Game of the Year getting re-released, like Far Cry 6. It's funny because Far Cry 6 hasn't won any awards even close to Game of the Year. Yet Ubisoft doesn't seem to care and knows that slapping those words on the cover of their game will lead to sales. They're not even being coy about it, just screw it, say it was Game of the Year. Who cares if the game has a 73 on Metacritic and a 4.8 user score? Gamers are dummies anyway, they'll buy anything that has Game of the Year on it. Remember when Batman Arkham City had their Game of the Year cover and it was the ugliest thing we've ever seen in the industry? Look, all I'm saying is when it comes to review scores and all that, maybe don't believe everything at face value. This is why when I see the Callisto Protocol getting pre-orders cancelled, it just makes me upset and angry. We all need to stop putting our faith with these game journalists and letting them decide what's good or bad for us. If I listened to these journos, I would have missed out on so many great experiences because of an arbitrary number on a website that has way too much power for its own good. Look, I get it, not everyone can afford every game, and many people would like to know if their money is being well spent or not, but here's the thing. There's so many alternatives to these websites, and you don't need to live and die by the words of someone like Jonathan Dornbush. You can get second opinions from actual players, watch Let's Plays and streams instead. If you take anything away from this video, I want you guys to do something for me. A little homework, if you will. I want you to start forming your own opinions more, and I want you to start questioning the things you've grown to accept in your life. Try to look behind the curtain, between the lines, and understand that a lot of things you're being conditioned to believe may just be lies in order to manipulate you. If you've ever been super hyped for a future video game and some review site gives it a 7 or a 6 out of 10, I want you to, instead of canceling your plans to play the game, to think for yourself and try it anyway. And if you don't end up liking it, that's why refund policies exist. The Callisto Protocol is a good game. Hell, it looks amazing, it runs great on PS5 at least, and is worthy of buying if you enjoy those kinds of games. And while we're at it, since we're here already, don't let game length dictate whether you buy a game or not. Callisto is apparently around 15 hours long, and I've read people saying that that's not long enough for full price. But But games like Resident Evil 2 Remake are like 10 hours long, and I would argue that that game is worth full price at release because of its quality. I'd rather buy a 15-hour great game than play a 50-hour long slogfest that wastes my time with the same crap over and over again like Far Cry 6. But then again, we have games up for Game of the Year right now that don't even let you use your brain to solve puzzles anymore. And we have people defending cosmetics in free-to-play games that cost more than entire games themselves. Ultimately, I just hope this video has shed some light for you in understanding that the gaming journalist landscape of today is full of individuals in bed with one another, looking to get favors for their opinions. Question everything you see, look beyond what's in front of you, and for the love of God, guys, start using your brain. And finally, stop listening to game journalists and form your own opinions. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe, share, and let me know what you think of the Callisto Protocol, gaming journos today, or whatever else you want to talk about. I'll be in the comments responding to you guys as always. Thanks to my patrons as always for their support, and I'm Endymion. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go make lazy lasagna with a mutated inmate's body in Callisto. I'll see you in the next one.